Welcome back to the HistoryGuy.com podcast. Today we're talking about the war in Northwest Africa, specifically the country of Mali, M-A-L-I, and the fact that the British are coming. The British are coming. It was recently announced that the United Kingdom is sending 250 Royal Army troops to West Africa, specifically Mali, as mentioned before, to assist in the armed conflict against jihadist forces there. This is a significant increase in British involvement in the current war in that part of Africa, which is being waged to protect local governments and people from jihadist Islamic militants. These British troops will join UN forces that already number some 13,000 troops from France, China, and many African nations, including American advisors. The British troops will be living and working and fighting in the deserts of Mali against the jihadist forces that have been active there since 2012. France already has about 5,100 troops in Mali with air support and armor, and they have been engaged against the jihadist forces there since France intervened back in 2013, when it appeared that Mali was about to be overrun by jihadists. The origins of that conflict in Mali go back quite a ways. It initially began with the Tuareg rebellion in northern Mali, which was the latest in the long series of these rebellions by the Tuareg peoples. The Tuareg are a desert-based ethnic group that has always had difficulty with central authority, especially from the more francophone and urbanized areas of southern Mali, where most political power in that country is held. Mali is a former French colony, and French is a language used in the government and among the educated classes, and it is and for that reason, France has an interest in becoming involved in and protecting the government of Mali, as well as economic concerns for the French. So, these Tuareg, it's an interesting story because following the overthrow of the Libyan strongman Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, which was a NATO operation to support Libyan rebels against Gaddafi, a large contingent of Tuareg fighters who had acted as mercenaries in Gaddafi's army left Libya, which was a good idea at the time, because he was dead and things were getting bad for his forces. But they left with their heavy weapons and vehicles, traveled home across the deserts to Mali, where they joined up with local jihadi groups, including Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, which had already been active in the region. The Maghreb is a local name for the area from Algeria through the Sahara Desert area toward the nations of the southern coast of Northwest Africa. So large desert area, the borders are fluid, and the insurgent forces can travel fairly easily with their vehicles. So in talking about the jihadist presence in West Africa, we need to understand, as mentioned before, it's not just limited to Mali. As mentioned, the fluid borders make it easy for the jihadist forces to travel between the different countries. For example, in the Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb began as an Algerian resistance group during the Algerian Civil War, which went from the 1990s through 2002. That was a war between the military-led government, which overthrew a popularly elected Islamist government that had just been elected, and then the Islamist/jihadist rebels. Eventually, the military wore down the rebels, and a peace deal was agreed upon. But some of the more extreme factions in Algeria decided to keep fighting, and they ended up joining up with Al-Qaeda and became Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb. So these forces, not just fighting in Mali, they're also battling in Burkina Faso, Algeria, Chad, and other nations. All these jihadist forces are mobile, and they've also made international connections with other established groups like Boko Haram in Nigeria, which is also associated with these international jihadist groups. Western powers such as the United States, France, and Great Britain have contributed to the UN peacekeeping forces in the area, and in the case of France, have contributed large numbers of troops. When France intervened in the Mali War in 2013, they were supported logistically by the United States, who flew in French troops and equipment for them. The British also supported the French, and In advance of these 250 British troops going in there soon, the Special Air Service, or SAS, which is the British equivalent of Special Forces, are already on the ground in Mali doing reconnaissance and setting things up for this larger contingent of British forces, which will be a mobile outfit that's going to take the conflict to the rebels. So when we look at the British and French involvement in this part of Africa, we also need to mention that the United States has troops in many of these countries, conducting training and going along with their trainees on patrols and missions. In 2017, Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, which is another group associated obviously with the Islamic State, these militants ambushed and killed 4 American soldiers in the West African nation of Niger. That attack brought to the public mind in the U.S. that American forces are involved in these wars and that they are in constant danger. This is part of the larger international conflict against the Islamic jihadist forces that include Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, which is also called ISIS, and other smaller groups that are not as well publicized but are involved in various insurgencies throughout Africa. In the Horn of Africa, we have Al-Shabaab, which is a Somali rebel group aligned with Al-Qaeda. The United States, just the other day, conducted airstrikes against Al-Shabaab. We already mentioned in Somalia. We already mentioned Boko Haram in Nigeria. There's also an Islamist rebellion in northern Mozambique, which is, coincidentally, the area of that country that has large petroleum and natural gas reserves. The Islamists need access to these resources to fund their wars. More than likely, with the British troops being more heavily involved in Mali, the English-speaking world will probably hear more about this almost hidden war in the deserts of northwest Africa. The international aspect to the war against jihadist groups is largely unknown in the West, at least in the English-speaking portions of the West. Here I'm talking about the United States, which is focused on a lot of other things right now for obvious reasons. Most American focus in terms of the war against Islamic jihadism, Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, Taliban, and so on, is on operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. And occasionally when the United States conducts airstrikes or commando raids in Libya, Yemen, or Somalia, that might get a few paragraphs in the newspaper or a quick mention in the news, but generally are not that well followed by Americans. And the American media, frankly, doesn't do a good job of keeping the American public up to date, which is one of the reasons we're talking about this today in our podcast and on our website, historyguy.com, where we have an article on this. So as events warrant, historyguy.com, the War and Conflict Updates, will update events and post to the website and also to this podcast. So look for more as we find out more from the world of international conflict. This is Roger Lee for HistoryGuy.com's War and Conflicts Update. Have a good day. If you like what we're doing, please subscribe. The more subscribers we have, the more often we'll be able to post these updates. Thank you very much.